Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today, we're going to be talking about digital image files. And today, we're going to be distinguishing between graphic software programs. So, the key terms that we're going to be thinking about are raster, vector, pixels, and resolution. Now, our learning outcomes today are to convey the difference between vector and raster programs and files. So there are two types of graphic software programs. You have raster software, and then you have vector software. Now, raster software creates images by using pixels. These pixels are short for picture elements, and they make up the image. Enlarging raster images can result in pixelation or jagged images. And the raster software will be used in this class is Adobe Photoshop, and we may also be using a free version called Photopea. Now, the other one we have is called vector software. Vector software creates images using mathematically defined lines. These lines are created by a series of mathematical points that can be changed without distorting the image. The vector software we're going to be using in this class is Adobe Illustrator, and we may be using a free web version as well.
Vector graphics and raster graphics are two basic of digital images you see every day. Do you know the difference between the two? No? Okay, let's look closer. Look at these two cupcakes. The one on the left is a vector image, and the one on the right is a raster image. Let's see what happens when we zoom in. The vector cupcake looks clear and undistorted because it's made up of points, lines, curves, and basic shapes. These elements are calculated for every level of scale, so the image quality stays the same regardless of size. The raster cupcake is grainy and distorted because it's made up of a bunch of small units called pixels. Zooming in makes the pixels a lot more obvious. Vector images are generally less detailed because they're composed of basic elements. Vector image file sizes are relatively small because they contain just the mathematical instructions for creating the image, not the actual visual elements themselves. In a raster image, the more pixels there are, the greater the level of possible detail. But more pixels also results in larger file sizes. Designs such as logos and signage are typically vector images because large scaling is often necessary for printing. Images with a high level of realism and detail, such as photos and digital paintings, tend to be raster images. Finally, these are some common file types for each kind of image.
So when we think about raster images are made up of pixels. Pixels are very small squares. Each square is a different color. These colored squares make up the images and photographs we see. The more pixels equals the more colored squares, and the more colored squares means it's a larger image size. We've all seen pixels before, either online when we grab a small file and try and make it bigger for a presentation, for example, and we notice that we see all of these small squares and it becomes kind of blurry when it's big, but when we shrink it down into a smaller size, it becomes a little more clear. This is because the resolution is relatively low. So when you zoom in on any raster image, usually when we think about raster images, we're thinking about photographs we might take with our phone or see online. If you zoom into a raster image, it will eventually become pixelated. So even if you have a large image that is high resolution, which means it has more image or more squares, no matter what, it's going to be made up of tiny, tiny, tiny squares. So if we look at this image of these leaves here, when we zoom into the corner of the leaf, we see that we still have more of these colored squares that make the image up.